Bria, you're on mute. There
I'm
we
so
go.
sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Generación STEM Get Future Ready live stream. My name is Marifer Zavala, graduate assistant for Generación STEM at Texas State. I'm so excited to be back for another Get Future Ready session. This week, I am joined by a very special guest, Sean Jameson. Mr. Jameson, it's a pleasure to be able to chat with you today about your work as Senior Vice President for VUV Analytics, Inc.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Definitely. And before we get into the more technical part of this conversation, will you please give us a bit of background about yourself?
Sure. The older you get, it becomes a longer story, I guess. But, youngest of five boys, which, for anyone that's familiar with an all-boy family, that can ultimately lead to a little bit of trouble. And for me, that ultimately landed me in a military school for high school, which straightened me out, but then, transitioned to college, coming out of that environment and landing at Texas State. And at the time, actually, it was Southwest Texas. There were newfound freedoms. There was that darn river. Hacky sack was new at the time. Their drinking age was lower. They won a D2 national championship back in those years in football. So, there were plenty of things to focus on other than school. And after my first year there, the school politely told me that I should go away and come back and grow up. And I did. Went to work for some large-scale construction companies, basically running a jackhammer during the summers in Texas, and kind of learned the value of an education. Returned to Texas State as a poli-sci major. And then one day, sitting in the room with my brother, who was my roommate, he said to me, "Boy, you should go try and take this class with Dr. Mahawk, a physics class, and what a great guy." And sure enough, I did that the next year and just fell in love with physics, and it really got me on a path for the first time. I ended up with a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a minor in mathematics there, but honestly didn't have a clue what I was going to do with those at the time. Naturally kind of went down the graduate school path, only to learn that, I'm really maybe not that smart. I was surrounded by a bunch of very smart people in physics programs in, graduate school there. Realized that, I probably need to go to work, put in resumes all over the globe, just hoping for something to land. Luckily, right down the street in Austin, SEMATECH Research Consortia for semiconductor manufacturing was starting up. Got a job there as kind of the lowest level technician assignment. They put me in charge actually of analytical instruments, which are kind of the low value at that time was considered low value instrumentation. And that was really the beginning for me. I fell in love with that. It gave me a lot of exposure to the full range of processes in semiconductor manufacturing, as well as a lot of different vendor companies, because there were a lot of analytical instrument providers there. Ended up going to work for one of them over the years and progressed my career largely staying in the world of metrology, the science of measurement. Worked for the 1,000-pound gorilla in that space for many years in a variety of roles: technical management, field marketing, sales, etc. Also spent 8 years as the VP of sales and marketing for an Israeli startup company in the semiconductor space. And then eventually I ended up in a sales role and eventually a CEO role for a venture-backed company in Austin, a startup company in Austin. We were solving, at that time, a very critical problem in semiconductors, measuring these very, very thin atomic deposited gate dielectric layers. And we eventually sold that company to an industry competitor. But when we did that, we kind of realized that the science we had developed there, and that was using lab scale vacuum ultraviolet light. We were the first really ever in the world to do this type of thing. And that science was probably bigger than the problem we were solving. So we sold that company, and our CTO and I split off and started a company to pioneer lab scale VUV light, vacuum ultraviolet light, to the general analytical sciences market. Today, that means that we make a GC detector, a gas chromatography detector, that plays in a bunch of different markets, whether it's anybody dealing with small molecule, volatile or semi-volatile molecules, flavors, fragrance, environmental, forensics, you name it. Maybe not surprisingly, oil and gas is a very big focus of our company, given that we're in Texas. We bootstrapped this company for several years, eventually took in a large amount of venture capital dollars there in Austin. Eventually, I hired my boss, the CEO of the company, and moved over to this role of business development, so Senior VP of Business Development for the company, where I really investigate, new markets, new applications, where our technology can be applied. I spend a lot of time at customer meetings and conferences all over the world, and really support our global sales partners to help drive our business. And a lot of people would say I'm really just the company's lead cheerleader, if you will.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for sharing. And we already kind of talked about this, but we asked you to be here today because we want our students to learn more about what career opportunities are available to them to explore after they complete their STEM career at Texas State. Can you tell us a little bit more about your job?
Yeah, I didn't really do anything specific to prepare for the job anyway. I really, again, was not smart enough to handle the technology development roles in the company. As an example, the early members of our company, my CTO is a PhD in experimental physics. One of our first hired computational PhD in computational physics, another PhD in physical chemistry, master's in mechanical engineering. But what I found that I was, just smart enough to fully grasp any of these ideas and discussions. Nothing, went over my head. And really that kind of layman's understanding, combined with perhaps my Irish gift of gab, if you will. I'm very good at translating our technology and our technology benefits to everyday users and customers and partners or investors. That's really my one skill, if you will, for my career. The greatest use of this in my mind is one-on-one discussions or in small group meetings. I wouldn't consider myself the best large-scale public speaker. I certainly do plenty of that, but really, kind of smaller one-on-one or small group settings has been my skill set, and I've identified that and leveraged that. Because of the technical background, I was never afraid to go into any session, any meeting. I've held my own with top scientists in all kinds of markets all over the world. One, because I'm also a good listener. I'm genuinely interested in their science and their markets. I also don't act like I fully understand their jobs. That's they're experts. And that's their space, and I've learned to respect that, and I don't try and be something I'm not. And I've learned enough from them that I begin to have empathy for their work and their problems and their challenges. And that really, for me, is kind of the basis in developing strategic plans to pursue those markets and or those customers. Again, back to that business development role. And frankly, I'm also wildly inquisitive about the sciences, the applications, and the competition, and maybe more broadly, the markets and the business drivers in those markets. That's really my focus.
And if a student was considering this career path, what things can they do while they're in school to better prepare for this type of role?
One, of course, study. Good grades are key. Internships obviously can help. Experience kind of is everything in this world. The basic things that I think everyone is already equipped with today, become super skilled with the PowerPoint and Excel and Also make certain you feel comfortable with other software packages in general. You're gonna, in any job, you're gonna be required to be skilled at either the CRM or the MRP, the workflow and ticketing packages, various software packages that you get thrown at you. Generally make certain that you're not put off by those. But I think, in all business environments, it's hugely important to become a comfortable speaker. Public speaking, sure, again, large scale, great. But I think, most importantly, speaking to connect with people. You've got to get your message across clearly, but without too much busy speak. People see through that and get bored with that quickly. You have to be convincing in anything you're telling people. You've got to speak with conviction. And again, you've got to be a great listener. You've got to be able to read the room, so to speak, and understand the audience. And that's part of being a good listener. I think in general, beyond school, any, key piece of advice for me is to get a job. Like I said, experience is everything. I had all kinds of aspirations for these roles that as a physicist, I might get, and then ended up at the lowest level technician position, and it worked fine. So, I would say accept a job, work hard, keep your eyes and ears open to the people, the companies, and the market drivers that, that surround that ecosystem that you're working in. Whatever that is, I'd always kept the mindset that my work ethic combined with, the quality of my work and my general knowledge of the business issues impacting my ecosystem, was always increasing my net worth, right? My net worth was always going up. And my value to any company within that ecosystem is that I'm employable. I'm valuable to them. And that'll also help you sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that, you are always employable.
Yes, thank you so much. And are you in the same line of work you thought you would be as a student at Texas State, or is it completely different?
Yeah, absolutely not. Really. I mean, I don't, when you're a student, you have no idea really what the scope of the jobs are that are available to you out there. As a physicist, that in your head, that means one thing. In practical reality, it's a very different thing. Like I think many of the folks watching, I had no exposure to anyone with a degree in physics in my family. I didn't know what jobs were available out there. I couldn't visualize what those roles or careers look like. But I would just say be confident that a science background provides a solid basis for many jobs. Even after working several decades in the semiconductor market, I ended up find myself now working in the world of chemistry. I certainly couldn't have imagined that 20 years ago. And I think there's kind of these classic studies out there that show that during your work career you're going to have 12 or 14 jobs, something like that, in your lifetime. And I think most people change careers a couple of times in their life. And the one that kind of resonates the best for me and is true is that the average age to start an entirely new career is something like 39 years old. So for those students right now worried about graduating and getting their first job, there are going to be changes. You're never going to visualize how it's going to play out. Just know that you're prepared, right? Again, that fundamental background in science gives you a really core basis, if you will.
Well, Mr. Jameson, thank you so much for being here today and helping our students learn more about your career and possible ways to prepare for entering the STEM workforce.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining for this edition of Get Future Ready. Have a great day and see you next time. If you're a student at Texas State working towards a career in the STEM field, please reach out to us so that we can help you navigate your STEM career. development at Texas State, and you can find us on social at Texas State Gen STEM. Thank you.
Thank you.